Hello, I am Rico Burton, and welcome to today's Back to Basics show. I volunteer with AARP here in Arizona and have a wonderful time doing it, and we welcome you here today. AARP is the nation's largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to empowering people 50 and older to choose how they live as they age. With a nationwide presence and nearly 38 million members across the nation and approximately 900,000 right here in AARP strengthens communities and advocates for what matters most to families: health security, financial stability, and personal fulfillment. Here in the month of November, we are going to be talking about caregiving, the health and the heart of caregiving, how we plan it, how we navigate through it, and things that are going to help your life be better for you and your loved ones. AARP is a wise friend and a fierce defender and a trusted source for all of your resources. Be sure to visit our website today or later on and share it with others. Today, we're here with Coach Sherry Ann, and we are going to be talking about keeping loved ones active when they're in a long term care facility. Good morning, good morning, good morning.
Good morning, Lady B. I so enjoy you doing these shows with me. It's just you bring so much to it, and so
Oh,
I
thank
thank you
you.
for you volunteering.
Well, I kind of like having you here with me too. So, kind of go the symbiotic relationship. And for those that are going to be joining us, make sure you let us know where you're from. And if you have questions or comments, please put them into the box and we will work our hardest to get to them. All
Yeah,
right. What do you
definitely.
have for us today?
Well, we've been talking about staying active and the importance of staying active as you age, and a lot of people are facing trying to decide if they need to put their loved one in a long-term care facility. And in 2 weeks, we'll be talking actually about how to start that conversation. And so, but today's just on the heels of being active. It's a challenge when you're putting your loved one in a long-term care facility because you're not there all the time then, and you're kind of turning it over to somebody else to help care for your loved one. And it's been proven that people that go to long-term care facilities, if they do not stay active, 50% of them are facing depression, because staying active is going to help you, not because when you're active you're usually socially connected, so you're not
Mhm.
isolated. So it's really important to help make for sure that you're facilitating the facility, keeping them active. And there's some things that you can do when you're getting ready to put your loved one in a long-term care facility to help make sure that that's happening, because you know activity and happiness kind of go hand in hand. Your quality of life and your happiness are really deeply connected. And so
Wow.
it's you want them to continue to have a nice quality of life when they're in a long-term care facility. So it's important that you stay positive as their caregiver, which so we have a lot of resources with ARP to help you as the caregiver and to stay positive and active yourself, because caregiving is a lot of work. Is a lot of work. Um, but by staying positive and active as they're in long-term care facility, they're going to reduce their chance of dementia by about 50%. Their
Wow.
mortality rate lowers about 19%. There's so many benefits to it. And if they have an accident, if they're active already, they're 44% more likely to recover quicker and not have lasting impacts. So keep them active. And
Well, and you don't have to be, well, I don't know how old we're talking about when we start talking about long-term, care facilities for people, because nowadays people that are younger, we think sometimes you have to be in your 80s or 90s to get there. Not necessarily so. There are people in their 50s and sometimes even a little bit younger that end up, for whatever reasons, having to be in these places. And I will tell you that I was at the Alzheimer's walk this past weekend, and AARP was right there passing out resources, which was wonderful. And I walked. Child, when I got home, I needed somebody else's knees and a new back. I was like, what's going on? And part of that is living, and I won't say completely sedentary, but certainly not being active enough. So I hear you. I absolutely hear you. So I just want our viewers to know that we're talking about the long-term care. It could be for people that are younger than we think in our heads and hearts that would
mhm.
normally be there.
Yeah, typically you're going into a long-term care facility because you're struggling with your activity daily, like care, just taking care of yourself, self-care. And so that's one of the things that you want to really focus on with your loved one. And So, and I always encourage families that when they're looking at long-term care, that they have one point person in their family that deals with the long-term care facility. Because
Mm.
long-term care facilities, they're used to dealing with very interesting family dynamics. It's very, very common that there's just a lot of animosity sometimes. There's, a lot of feelings that go into making that decision. So it's really important that you just have one person in your family be the contact person for the long-term care facility. And in that way, and then you have one person there that's you're talking to that's in direct correlation to your loved one. And because it just helps with communication and it helps diminish the chance of miscommunication, uh, and making sure that they're really cared for in the way that you want them to be cared for. And if you're not close by, there's all kinds of, you can consider hiring a care manager. So if you don't live close to your loved one and you're thinking about having to put them in a long-term care facility because they're unable to care for themselves, consider hiring a care manager, somebody that's going to be like family. There's people out there that is their sole job, to be a liaison between families and long-term care facilities.
Wow. It must be very challenging for families that have, several siblings and you're trying to decide who's going to do what. And, like you said, one person that can be a lot on the one person. And the other siblings or whomever else family members can say, well, you're the one handling it, handle it. And it becomes very, very hard. So
Oh yeah.
wow, there's some other challenges there. Yeah.
Yeah, and with challenges, it's really important to have open lines of communication to help reduce the stresses that come with those challenges. And so, and then one of the things that you want to think about when you're moving your loved one into a long-term care facility is try to keep their room as familiar as possible, especially if they have dementia or anything of the sort. It just helps feel less disruptive and less stressful and change. And because when there's stress, people tend to like really close everything off. They tend to isolate to manage it. So if you're creating it to be, more familiar, less disruptive, then they're more likely to spend that energy that they would trying to cope doing something else, and it would encourage them to be active. So try to keep their room as familiar as possible with things that they bring stuff from home to their room to make it lovely. And one of the things too that we have to remember is you want to ask your loved one what they want to do. Like, it's important to involve them in the process unless they're completely incapable. And then we're talking about a totally different care facility. But make sure you're asking your loved one like what they would like to do to be active. And every long-term care facility, every single one of them has a calendar of events and activities that they're doing. And so you have to make sure that you ask for that calendar and you're involved in getting your loved one involved in those activities or events, because every long-term care facility has them. That's just part of it. And if you don't see something on the calendar that you would like to put on the calendar, like say your loved one wants to take dancing classes, ask the long-term care facility if they can bring someone into the facility to teach dancing classes. So everything's available for you. You just have to ask for it. And the long-term care facility will do whatever they can to make it easy on you, because if the loved one is happy and content and healthy, it makes it easier on the nurses and the staff. And so they want to make it comfortable for you. So, but yeah, make sure that you're taking a look at that calendar, because usually on that calendar, there's all kinds of fun things. Like there's usually arts and crafts, usually bingo and older people somehow always go together. But even I play bingo with my girlfriends every once in a while, and it's a hoot playing bingo. But listening to music, sometimes they'll get the people together to listen to music together, and reading. Sometimes they'll provide walking. Depending upon where the long-term care facility is, they can walk as a group. And sometimes they bring in younger people. Like when my kids were in preschool, we would take regular trips to the long-term care facilities to visit with older people, because it would just light them up and keep them active and engaged. And so sometimes there'll be intergenerational activities going on, but they'll have social gatherings. So definitely take a look at the calendar that they have offered and make sure that you're taking advantage of all the things that they offer. So, and You were going to say something?
No, it's just, it's a lot to take in. It's more than a notion when we start to think about long-term care and long-term care facilities. So I imagine we have to really, really choose wisely. So I really appreciate that we're having this conversation today and the information that you're sharing, because it gets us to start at least to thinking about it. Because it's hard for many people when you're used to having your loved ones with you to let them go someplace else and entrust their care to somebody else. That's an
Mhm.
emotional kind of thing for everybody involved.
Oh, 100%, which brings me to the next thing as far as making sure you're staying in communication with your loved one and the staff that's taking care of them so that they can maintain some sort of self-care. Because usually the reason that they're going into long-term care facilities is their self-care is diminishing. So having a point of contact and then also talking with your loved one, because if they are maintaining at least some sort of self-care, then that gives them, it increases their self-confidence, their self-worth, which we all know from young to old, if you have increased self-confidence and increased self-worth, you're going to be more active. You just are. It just kind of goes hand in hand. Um, and taking care of yourself boosts your energy levels. I mean, think about how, I mean, it's the reason why we kind of shower in the morning. Not only is it for everyone around us so that we smell better, but it also invigorates us and awakens us. So there's a part of self-care that actually, and sometimes I'll brush my teeth like midday for no reason, just because brushing my teeth will invigorate me. It makes me just feel a little bit better. I don't know why, but
A little weird, but okay. That's an easy thing, isn't it? Sometimes we try to look for so many outside things that are going to make us feel better. I like how you said that that's something simple and easy you can do. We can find those things in our lives. I don't know, as we're talking here today, so many of the things that we've talked about over the several weeks are just, while you're talking now, they're just coming back to mind and they're falling in place for me. This is wonderful.
well, and it's important because when you are doing self-care, it provides an opportunity for you to self-monitor,
Mm.
to not only self-monitor yourself physically, but also your mental health. And so self-care is more than just cleaning your, body, brushing your teeth, and doing that. There's a lot more to self-care in the sense of checking yourself out physically and your mental and emotional health. And so self-care, if you're not doing it, I mean, think about, I mean, if you've ever had someone depressed that's in your life, they usually stop taking care of themselves. They usually stop showering as frequently and don't start moving. They move less. And so it's important to have that self-care because it kind of gets the ball rolling. But emotional self-care for your loved one is just as important as it is for you taking care of them. And so having those conversations with the staff, with their doctor and someone for yourself too, is making sure that you're doing it because you want to mirror for them, your loved one, what you want them to be doing. So it all goes hand in hand in staying active and staying healthy. And they still have choices when they're in long-term care facilities. Yes, there's usually a menu that's provided, but within that menu, they also get choices. And so having those choices helps with activity, staying active, making sure that you're choosing healthy and exercising and maintaining your hobbies, but also with the emotional health, also taking time to relax, and have downtime, have that certain level of boredom, because within boredom comes creativity. And so I think so many times we're so busy like trying to fill the schedule and fill the calendar that we forget that it's actually good to have downtime. That's when we end up processing information and creating memories and filing things off in our brain. So having that downtime, that relaxation time and getting good sleep is just as important as actually moving your body and being active. It's equally important.
I wonder if at the long-term care facilities, you talk about modeling things. Do they have opportunities to do things together? Like, for instance, wash our hair together, or could we, clip our nails or file or polish our nails or just do little things? Are there opportunities to do those kind of things together so that you're spending the time, not just spending the time, how are you? You doing okay? So it's active, interactive.
Mhm. Oh, yeah. I mean, and these are things when you're considering a long-term care facility for your loved one to be looking at on the calendar and making sure that they are facilitating. I mean, they should be. I said earlier on they absolutely do, but I should be careful because I'm sure there's long-term care facilities out there that their calendar is not, very full. But so make sure that you're looking at it and then seeing if there are the opportunity for group activities to come together and, with same gender, women like getting together and washing their hair, and so it's, things like that, like you said. And they do typically have group activities where they'll come and do like balance classes, within, and because sometimes in long-term care facilities, a lot of people are confined to a wheelchair or confined, having forced to use a walker. And they'll bring people into the facility that specialize in doing like chair yoga. So you can do yoga, you don't have to get on the floor, but you can do yoga in chair and do chair exercises. Um, Sometimes they'll have transportation and they'll take a group to a water aerobics class. So there are different levels of activity that are going to be available to you. You just have to make sure that you're choosing the right long-term care facility that actually offers all of those things.
Well, part of the choice, of course, has to do with money.
100%.
So
100%.
yeah, that is something too. So not all long-term care facilities are equal, I suppose, until in terms of that. And so that's something to consider and something to plan for, perhaps, as we look forward.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, so when we talk in 2 weeks about starting that conversation, we'll actually talk about, I have a list of things for you to consider when you're thinking about long-term care facility and even how to even start the conversation with your loved one about it, and then how to even go about making all the decisions that are encompassing of doing it. So
Wonderful.
it's a challenge, and so, but once they're in there, it's important that you're helping, like I said, talking to the staff and making sure that your loved one is staying active and just showing up every now and again and doing something with them. When my grandfather was in a long-term care facility and he was pretty much confined to, I mean, we had a wheelchair for him. We had a really tiny one that would fit in the car so we could take him places. But I would go pick him up and I would get him out of the facility and take him places, but I know that there's people out there that don't have family to go to do that for them, and so that's why if you don't live close, it's important that you can think about hiring a care manager, like I mentioned earlier, someone that can go and actually take your loved one to go do something active, outside of the facility, but if they're confined to the facility, then making sure that you're doing something with them there. There's so many things. I mean, and if you want to do something with your loved one in the facility, you can easily Google or go to YouTube and ask for and Google and search for chair exercises, or chair yoga or, dancing in a chair, especially because they still need to be active, even though they're in a wheelchair, because it will help their longevity and help their happiness as well.
Mm-hmm. Arizona, having been for years a retirement state, if you will, was a place where people came to retire. I imagine that there must be lots of long-care term facilities here. Yes.
Yes, there's a lot of them, and so and like I said, we'll cover this in 2 weeks. We probably should have done that one today, but it's knowing how to interview a long-term care facility too, to see if it's going to be a good fit for not only you but your loved one. But yeah, because there are so many out there. And then, like you said earlier, budget usually has a huge role in deciding where you end up going.
Sure.
But yeah, just show up. If you have the ability for your loved one to show up to help keep them active, do that, and take them on walks if they can go on walks. It's the most lovely thing that you can do, not only for your loved one, but also for you, for giving. And like I said before, if you're not close by, another thing that you can do also to stay engaged is, and I discovered this when I was kind of just doing some research, is there's a tech product called a GrandPad. And so their website is grandpad.net. And it's designed for elderly people. Like the buttons are a little bit bigger on it. Like it's a little easier to use. It's not as fancy as an iPad, but it does just exactly what you would need it to do for them in order to provide some stimulus, but also to do FaceTime. That you can see your loved one. Because sometimes just talking to them on the phone, you're not going to notice some things. But seeing them on an iPad, if you're not able, a GrandPad, if you're not able to see them in person, it will help you with them and just staying connected and seeing how they're looking and facial expressions, their mood. I mean, I've known people that have, FaceTimed their loved one and noticed that something was wrong with like their face, like their eye. And so they were immediately able to like bring it to the attention. Because the reality too is at long-term care facilities, these nurses are overworked and underpaid. So if you're showing up for your loved one, be sure to thank those caregivers that are there, like taking care of your loved one, because they work very, very hard. And they're very much underappreciated, and so it's important to show your appreciation to them when you show up and say hello and give them a smile as well.
That makes sense to me. We hear a lot of horror stories about long-term, well, all of these care facilities too. So I can't wait almost a couple of weeks from now when we talk more about that in terms of choosing and planning. So we really have to do our due diligence for that and try to find a place. I like what you said about the pad, the grand pad, because not only for the person that is caring for or watching the loved one, but your grandchildren or your great grandchildren, they would get a chance to see you too. And we know how much that livens up the life and the smile and the heart of any parent or great grandparent when they see their kids. So that's another opportunity to keep those memories there for the children as well, for
Yes.
longevity and for your legacy.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Like I mean, I loved seeing my grandfather, and it was so cute because other people would be like, they would be so excited to see me because I'd also come in, with these little people in tow that just lit up their world, and they would have so much fun playing with them. But back to what you were saying about, yes, we do hear horror stories, and I don't want to deny the fact that there is abuse that happens in long-term care facilities. But that's also why you want to stay engaged. And that's also why you want to know who is taking care of your loved one when you're not there and having a point of contact. Because if you notice anything, then you can know exactly who to go to and who to have a conversation with. Because yeah, I'm not going to deny the fact that that does happen, and it happens more frequently than I'd like to say, but but that's why you want to stay engaged.
Right.
And helping your loved one stay active, because if they're active and their self-confidence is up, they're most likely not going to be a victim.
Wonderful.
Yep. So I don't know if we had any questions or any comments that came in from people that are dealing with long-term care facility.
I've not seen any come through here. I've checked again, but no, I've not seen any. But I will add to this for anyone watching. AARP also offers classes and presentations about caregiving. All right. Some things that could be very, very helpful to you. Please take a look at the resources. We have trained people who will come out and speak to you and or have other opportunities for you to come to where they're speaking with lots of resources, printed information and material that's going to help make your life a little, allay some of your concerns and get some of your questions answered. So you have a friend in AARP along the way. So Coach Sherry Ann is here today sharing this, and she's going to share some things in a couple of weeks. But AARP along the way is filling in that gap. Make sure you take a look at some of those things should you find yourself in this situation or have a friend or loved one that's there too.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the thing is sometimes you don't even know what you don't know. And you don't know the questions to ask, and you don't even know where to start. And AARP is a wonderful resource to go to just kind of kickstart the thought process of what needs to happen and the questions that need to ask. And yes, there are people that specialize in, like you said, Lady B, come to your house and we'll sit down with you, because it's a emotional decision. It's a very emotional and well thought out decision that has to happen when you decide to do this for your loved one, which they should be involved in that conversation as well. But yeah, sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And so use AARP as a resource to help you.
Absolutely. I mentioned earlier that, sometimes younger people end up in long-term care facilities. I had an acquaintance that had a stroke, and she could no longer really kind of take care of herself and found that she needed to be there. And she wasn't in the scheme of things. The older we get, the younger people seem, right? So it's like years ago, 50 was old until you get there. and so, just be mindful that the information is power. And even if you don't think you need it for you, sometimes learning about it and sharing it with others, being able to share it with other people that you care about, is a wonderful thing too. So there's a lot of reasons to learn about this, and you don't want to wait until you need it to know.
No, no, that's why we'll talk about that in 2 weeks, but don't wait until, because if you're making decisions in a stressful situation, it makes it worse. So we'll talk about being prepared so that you're not in a heightened state making decisions.
Well, we've seen that when people want to retire, if they haven't planned well or if something goes awry, right? And then they find themselves in a state where, oh my word, what do I do? Or what's out there? And many times the AARP has a lot of resources and things for that too. But that's, I think, a great example for us to consider when we're talking about finding out more information about this particular topic too.
Well, and you said it earlier, I love it. You're like, don't wait, in the sense of, but sometimes just finding the information to maybe support someone else,
Yes.
or just to have the knowledge so that when you get to that bridge, you're like, okay, I've seen this. Now I can dig a little deeper. But sometimes just supporting someone else in the process. If you have a friend that's going through it, walk with them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think part of the beauty of that is you can help somebody else emotionally. You can support them in that way. But also, if you've gone through it with someone or while you're learning, if heaven forbid you get there and have to make some decisions, the emotional state you'll be in will be different because you've gone through some of those emotions while you've had to learn about it or experience this or that or the other. So then when you find yourself in this, you won't be as anxious probably, and probably more mentally prepared.
Oh, I tell my parents, my dad, I'm like, because I walked beside him as he was making decisions for his parents, and then when they passed, I was like, well, I think I know what I'm going to do for you now. So I was like,
Right?
and you better not make things hard on me.
But it is hard. It's hard whenever we lose a loved one.
Oh,
And
yeah.
right. And it's hard when we have to let them go. And culturally speaking, people handle families different and they're so used to them. Many people have their parents or their grandparents living in the house with them,
Oh, yeah.
so it's not about, and then what about the ones that don't? What do you do with their house? How do you navigate that? And so there are some other things. Are you going to talk about that too? I'm getting into too much that you're going to talk about next time, and I don't even know it.
That's a whole nother thing. Like there's a host of things that have to be dealt with when someone moves into a long-term care facility. And it's overwhelming. It can be overwhelming, but that's where you lean on great organizations like AARP that have people that are meant and here on this planet, determined to help you. And so it's important to ask for help, and not think that you've got to be a lone wolf figuring it out on your own.
So keeping people active in the place, that's what we're talking about here now. And so I know many places do have exercise classes that they can go to. And, like you say, and I wonder, are there volunteer opportunities for people to go in and help?
Yeah, my kids have volunteered. Like,
Oh.
yes. Yeah. I make my kids volunteer. Well, I used to make them. Now they choose to do it. But yeah, you can definitely. And I love long-term care facilities to take my kids to, because they're just, I think older people are a lot like children, where their filter goes away and they're just so fun to have conversations with. And they have so much history and stories to tell that so there's definitely volunteer opportunities at long-term care facilities to go in and help facilitate activities, have conversations with people, take people for walks. Absolutely. Usually you typically have to do a background check, which isn't a big deal. But yeah, if you have time to volunteer, long-term care facilities are a hoot.
I think we need to make some time. Yeah, when I was a child, I used to go to convalescent homes and sing and play the piano for them. And that was so much fun. And that's an opportunity too, to go and, Christmas carol or do something else for them. And not long ago we did, well, it's been a year or so now. I went and instead of a vision board, we asked them, what did they want their families to remember about them? How would they like, what do they want to share with their families? And so they made these pictorials about things that they did when they were little or this or that. And it was just so wonderful because it was like storytelling right on what we would call normally a vision board. So there are some opportunities out there. And that, of course, is keeping people busy in terms of motor skills and all the rest.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Well, I appreciate everything that you shared today. It makes me emotional almost. It gets it going because when we love our loved ones, we're concerned about what's going to be best for them. And we want to make sure that we can do what we need to do for them as well. Oh,
Mhm.
I look so forward to all of you who joined us today. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Share this information with others. Let somebody else rewatch this and join us in a couple of weeks when we talk about how to plan for your loved one to go into a long-term care facility. Yeah. Thank you, Coach Sherry. And we appreciate you. Thank you very much. God bless.